Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the CKI series of podcasts on customs issues. Today, we are discussing education, customs education, and I am indeed honored to be joined by two very distinguished authorities in this area. We have Professor Michael Wolffgang of the University of Münster, who has a long career in customs education, and by Frank Heijmann, who is Customs Counsellor at the Permanent Representation of the Netherlands to the European Community. Both have a history of being involved in the development of the EU Customs Competency Framework, which, as most of our listeners will know, acts as the basic framework for anybody conducting a training course in the European Union in customs. So it's a very significant piece of work, and it is indeed a great honor for us to have two of the architects of that framework joining us to talk about the current state of customs education. As always with these podcasts, I will begin by giving a little preface, as it were. The complexity of customs is increasing at, frankly, a frightening rate. At the present time, we have sanctions affecting companies all over Europe, and particularly in the eastern part of the Union, and presenting them with challenges they have not faced up to now. On the western side of the European Union, of course, we are still coping with the consequences of the exit of the UK, which presented traders in the western half of the Union particularly with a level of customs and engagement and depth of engagement with customs that they had no previous experience of. As a result, I think it's fair to say that across Europe, business is scrambling for knowledge, for expertise, and for competence to be able to deal with customs on a level that I would suggest has not been experienced in the past. It raises questions about how exactly information can be got to business. How can we help business managers to understand the new and expanded role of customs? How can we get planners in procurement, purchasing, sales, and so on, the knowledge and expertise they need to manage their supply chains? And at the very basic level, how can we ensure that the customs declaration, which is of course the center of all customs enforcement, how can we reduce the error rates there and reduce the risks by increasing the skill and the capability of a rapidly expanding workforce, many of whom have no previous experience? So there are many, many challenges facing customs in terms of disseminating the essential information and education and understanding that will make the system, as it were, return to where it was in the past, perhaps, of something that is simply an everyday thing that people can cope with, from its present position where it is for many a serious challenge. Sorry for the long preface, but that's, I think, a summary of my perception, at least, of where we are with education. Could we start off, perhaps, I wonder, talking about the current level of provision across Europe as you perceive it, and the gaps in that? Would you like to start, Frank?
Yes, please. If you look at what's now the current reality of customs, it actually already goes back about 20 years. Where customs were in the past mainly, they were related very often to tax administrations, and they were actually tax officers. And over several decades in the past, customs, they They did some additional tasks, which we called then non-fiscal obligations, but they were actually aligned with the fiscal task very much. And we saw the first change actually in the zeros coming when security became of vital importance in international trade, and customs also got a role in that security aspect. And that role actually was first laid down and recognized by the World Customs Organization when they drafted the SAFE framework to secure and facilitate global trade, where they recognized that we have now also, next to the fiscal tasks at the border, we have to look much more upstream to relate to security aspects. But that security aspect gave new burdens in international trade. It provided for new obligations, and at the same time, there was a need for recognition of reliable traders, because not everyone needed to be subject to the new rules and burdens as much as not similar for everyone. So we needed to introduce this AEO concept. So these were the two sides of the same coin. On the one side, we had this increased security need, and on the other side, we introduced the AEO, the Trusted Trader Network. And then at the end of the zeros, we started to recognize, and we was a group of people, amongst which Professor Wolffgang and me, we recognized that the customs officials in trade and of customs professionals in trade and in the government, in the public sector, they had a very high level of knowledge, but they still had secondary level of education. And the knowledge was related to customs procedures, to fiscal tasks, and some non-fiscal tasks. But when we introduced compliance, that was a new terminology. And also the security was a new role, because if you look upstream, then you need to know about supply chain. So that's when we recognize new skills are becoming part of our business. It's not only the tax officer anymore, it's also about supply chain management. It's about business compliance. It's about understanding each other's business from the public and from the private sector. And when we actually recognize that, we said, are we the only ones who recognize this, or are there more people in the world that recognize it? And that led to actually a questionnaire to all customs administrations in the EU, where we asked, do you share this vision? Do you share this view that the current customs professional in public and private sector have to have a wider knowledge of the field than strictly this legal or enforcement part? And that was actually the outcome of that questionnaire, was the start of thinking of new education with more pillars than only the traditional legal customs act. And that also was the start for drafting of what you already referred to, the competency framework for customs professionals in customs and business, where next to the legal aspects, we lay down supply chain knowledge, we lay down compliance knowledge, but more even than that, learn about each other's world, learn about each other's business. What is the business for the customs professional? What is the business for the trade professional? And how do they know from each other's tasks, roles, and responsibilities? And
I was interested, Frank, sorry for interrupting, but I was interested when we spoke previously that at the higher level of knowledge and understanding, you see a very large crossover between the experience and knowledge required of the customs official and that required of the business operator.
Definitely I do. And although that is not similar in all levels, but I think the higher the level gets, the more crossovers there are. If you look at people out in the field, customs officials need to know how to do physical checks and how to verify declarations, and professionals in business, they need to know how to draw up the declarations, but they also need to know about warehouse management and business logistics procedures. But if you go a level above that, they see they both need to know about the law a lot more, and need to know about the position of the law in let's say, its implications in business. And it's difficult to say exact percentages, but
sure,
a rough estimate would be that on the basic operational level, there's 30% of similarities. And if you move up to maybe a bachelor's level, then in a company or in the government, then you would already have 50 to 60% similarities in the knowledge and the capacities and the competencies. But when you then move to the master's level, people leading the business, leading the government, then it's maybe already 80 up to 80% is my estimate that there are similar competencies required. And then you come to education, you put them together in the classroom, and 4 out of 5 days they learn the same job.
Yeah. Interestingly, Professor, when we spoke earlier, you identified a particular need for information at this higher level of knowledge in business in particular, that business needs to understand, if you like, the pervasive nature of customs as it is now. Is that right?
Thanks, Tony. First of all, I would like to say that the relation which was just indicated by Frank, I would support that. I think it's the same. I agree with him that from his assumption that this is the relation between all the main or joint knowledge of business and public service, and then on the other side, different levels which were named by Frank. So this is, I think that's very true. And so this topic has a lot of aspects. Let me say that.
Yes.
I would like to just a little bit to elaborate as well what Frank said. We speak about the Customs Competency Framework of the European Union, but that's not the first step in the knowledge world or the education world in customs. This is a framework of the European Union, and before there was already the PICARD standards of the World Customs Organization, and I was involved in this development of the PICARD standards since 2006 or so, I would say. And Frank was involved as well in his position. So this is already on the global level, a development which is going on. And I remember that we spoke about in the WCO at that time, what level do we want to regulate, or maybe do we want to make some provisions or make some proposals or what else? So it's independent of the legal structure of such a proposal. And we spoke about as well about professional level and academic level, but said it is too difficult now on the global level to speak about the professional jobs. Let's try to start with the academic field. And so the professional standards are aimed to bachelor and master's education or training. And so far as I can see, many universities worldwide have already asked for recognition according to the PICARD standards. So this is a project which was very successful, and I think the European Union then took over the idea. And we were involved in the very first studies about this possibility, and the meetings regarding the Customs Competency Framework, which I would say at the end is much more, let's say, sophisticated than the PICARD standards, much more deeper, it's broader, it's more intensive. So it's really like the European Union is working, it's more broader. It's broader, I would say. And that means we have a framework in place for the academic level, and in the Customs Competency Framework in general, they is laid down the way for professional courses as well. And what the complexity of customs concerns, it is huge, as you mentioned, Tony. It's a huge complexity which we are facing today, which was not so much maybe 20 years ago, as just mentioned by Frank, but which became more and more complex. And now the status I think is the most complex I've ever seen.
Yes.
In customs, in the customs world, from the political and economical and legal aspects. So it's different views on this. And to manage such a complexity, I think knowledge is the key. The only way is knowledge, and that's the reason why we are talking.
Doesn't that raise an additional complexity, Professor? And perhaps you might come in on this as well, Frank. Is that what I perceive as a humble practitioner in the field? What I perceive is that a lot of people who are looking for customs training are looking for niche training. In other words, they're looking to solve their own businesses or their own firm's problem. And that it presents a problem for educators or for people designing educational offerings, because on the one hand, you can present short, focused training on particular topics, but you're often delivering that to people who lack the overview and the understanding of the conceptual framework, as it were, of international customs, so that the niche training, which would perhaps lead to micro-credentials or to some low-level certificates, very often proves inadequate to populate the overall understanding of customs, because it's incremental, and often it doesn't lead to a step up to that strategic and kind of worldview type of education in training that perhaps we would see as being necessary. Would you like to comment on that, Frank?
Yes,
Am I right, first of all, in my perception?
No, yes, it's definitely you're right. I think there are two things to this. On the one side, it is indeed what you said, these credential parts of education, not an overall education of the whole business field. Everyone is focusing it from its own, let's say, quite narrow interests. And I even remember the times that we tried to set up a curriculum for a program that's running in the Netherlands, a master's program at Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University. And in the drafting of the curriculum, there were a lot of parties involved, because it was a let's say, a consumer demand focused education. And who was then the consumer? Who are the students? The students were officials from the government. The students were consultants. The students were IT people. The students were people from logistics sector, from shippers, from shipping lines. And we had all these representatives around the table, and everyone was bringing in his needs. And everyone wanted to have an education, a full educational program on his needs. And at the end, you end up with 10 different curricula, and then you would have to offer 10 different programs, whereas the niche so narrow that there is no business model to be created on that. So that's where we had quite a struggle to find a kind of, what is then the common denominator that everyone needs to know, regardless if you work in the consultancy, in the IT sector related to customs, in the trade sector, logistics, or in the government. And that was quite a big struggle to find that common denominator. And you see that still a lot of customs educations, they are focused on the individual need of an individual supply chain actor, although you have to have an overall view on everything. That's the first difficulty there is. Everyone has to give a bit away of his individual needs to find a sufficient common ground to build on a proper curriculum. And then the second part is that, as well in customs as in the private sector, the field of customs always has been an operational field. These were people in operations. These were always practitioners. But with the increased demands, and it started, as said, with safety, security, compliance, but nowadays, if you look at the European Commission has made an analysis that next to customs legislation, customs enforces 348 different regulations at the border, and there's more to come. There is also an increased complexity, which puts the demands to a higher level than merely practitioners level. Then we need to have these higher educated people in the business. then you come immediately to the problem, because then also this logistic service provider, also this customs declarant, also this shipping company, or this shipper, they suddenly need to be aware of the fact that they need to employ not only practitioners to operate in the business, but they need to have higher educated people. And then you get into this kind of a struggle, because there is no offering on the market of those people. Universities, they did not offer these kind of educations sufficiently. Why not? Because there was no demand, and the demand is not there because a lot of the companies and customs administrations still, up till today, do not realize themselves that they need to have these higher educated people. So you are in a little bit of a circle. Yeah. If you look at the total amount of people working in this business, we have 100,000 customs officers in the 27 member states. And I think that even 5 times that amount is working in the business sector in this field. So this is more than 500,000 people working in this business. And if you would break them into levels,
you find it difficult to get more than 10 people to sign up for any course.
Yes, but that's a very weird contradiction, that you have more than 500,000 people working in the union in this business, and that if you subscribe for a course, that whatever level it is, the higher you get, the less people you have. But there is a demand. You have to create awareness of the demand. And I think that the situation is not similar as in the past, when you started with educating people in the business administration field. The tax field has a much more history in higher level education and offering of the business sector.
Are we not moving, Frank, towards, and perhaps, Professor, you might like to come in on this. My perception is, as Frank has said there, the sophistication is increasing, the need for higher level education is increasing, and I would think that the move away from the challenge of customs being to get your goods across the border, which was the traditional challenge of customs, and once your goods were across the border, that was it, your job was done. Now we are moving very emphatically into a legal sphere, where post-clearance checks are giving rise to a need for legal experts, for experts in running appeals, in managing the finer points of customs law. So perhaps I wonder, are we heading in a direction which is closer to that we would traditionally associate with tax, where you have experts all around the world who know the finer detail of the most minute and obscure tax schemes? Are we moving into that territory with customs, do you think?
I think we are moving in this direction, but very slowly.
Okay.
That's very slowly, because think back 20 years or so, there was no academic education in the customs field as far as I can see worldwide. So in the 90s, first programs started, for example, I think in Latvia, for example, or in other countries of East Europe. But in Western Europe, there was no academic program existing. In Australia, as you know, David Widdowson is one of the first who started with a master's program globally in English language for the international audience, and then in 2005, University of Münster followed, and afterwards, some 10 years later, I think around Rotterdam started with the program, the international program. So there are only very few programs worldwide existing on an international level, and that's exactly what's the point. I think an academic program, a master's program, has to focus on the global level. We have a lot of topics. We have the legal topics, we have the economic topics, logistic topics, and everything what mentioned. But we have to do it from a global level, or at a global level, because this is a necessity today in the globalization or in the globalized world, or even in case it is less globalizing currently, the complexity becomes even more. And to manage this in, let's say, international companies, multinational companies, international organizations, even in national administrations at the higher level in the ministry or so, you have to know these different implications which are existing for not only customs in this small world, it's international trade, it's more dualistic, it's much more which is behind the word of customs, and which means everything what customs is. Customs is multidisciplinary, as we all know. And insofar it is necessary to have really a broader view in regarding of the international level. And these programs which are running or which are existing, I think they try to tackle all these aspects.
Yes, yes. And one of the things in this complexity, and as you say, in the uncertain delivery or the diverse forms of delivery that occurs, is certification, central certification, say at a European level, university level. Is that perhaps a unifying force? Is that something that might, because we have this challenge of lots of small private training providers, as well as some universities, still not all universities. It is still the fashion, to my observation in universities, to offer a course in international trade, and not to mention customs, because that's kind of something that you mentioned in passing. But to make this, to kind of maybe give some direction to the marketplace in education, certification could be a thread, and the availability of certification could certainly distinguish between high quality courses and others that are somewhat opportunistic. And we see a lot of that in the UK and Ireland at the moment, of opportunistic training providers who say, you know, attend this webinar for 1 hour and you will understand everything about customs. So, you know, to maybe differentiate the market, perhaps certification. And in that line, would you see, well, there is obviously a combination of university certification and then central commission certification. How important is it that the European Commission relaunch its program of certification for university courses, and indeed should they extend it to other courses, non-university courses, which may be of high quality as well?
Maybe I can reflect on that, but first I want to touch upon a small other aspect about the kind of a business, because I was talking about, we were talking about niche approach, and you can be a niche player in customs legislation, you can be a niche expert in deforestation, a niche expert in CBAM, and the kind of education that is being offered at universities on bachelor or master's level, they're mostly faculty related. You're a lawyer, or you're a supply chain manager, or you're an economical expert, or whatever. But what you see here is we are talking about crossover field, a crossover field which moves right through the traditional pillars within the academic world, where they have these specialized faculties, and we want to have specialists with crossover knowledge. And this is a kind of an evolution which needs to break through an existing system of education. And if you look at the master, we have nowadays the master in business administration, bachelor in business administration. If you look at what is being taught there, this is the background which traditionally was in pillars of financial knowledge, a trade knowledge, a marketing knowledge, and some of it has been, the universities have achieved that it's now a crossover education, master in international business, master in European business. They're not a specialist in one field or in the other field, but they have the overview. That's something that we need to create in this customs world as well. because in Münster, people, they are educated a lot about export controls. It's a different topic than business compliance. It's a different topic than customs law, but the crossover is being offered in that education in Münster. Same as supply chain management and IT and customs legislation, traditionally even alpha and beta sciences, but they are being offered in one system of education. And those crossovers, they have to be recognized by the academic, by the educational institutes, and then they need to start offering it to create a to serve the demand of the business sector. And then it comes to recognition in place. We already had the PICAR recognition in place. PICAR, which gives a kind of a stamp. This is accredited by or recognized by the World Customs Organization. This is an incentive also in your marketing. The recognition of the EU is on the one side also giving a certain level of quality guarantee, because an independent board has assessed, recognized this meets these and these criteria on the content. So it does not and actually say something, is it now a secondary or a master or a bachelor's level, but it gives a certification, a recognition on, but the content is of a higher quality. And that is also serving marketing needs, because if you can offer an education recognized by the European Commission, that is also creating additional attractiveness for businesses to send their staff or for students actually to start studying there. And that is maybe a way to simply create that world that we need, because we need educations in the crossover, and we need to join up universities that offer it and students that actually join the studies. And marketing with the European Commission actually can help to stimulate that process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. Professor, do you want to comment?
Yeah, recognition is a word. And I agree that recognition of a program by the European Commission is very valuable, and especially from not only from the point of marketing, but really from the point of quality and quality assurance. I think this is what it is most important. It's not the marketing what is the most important from the point of the maybe European Commission. The most important is that people working in the field of customs or international trade, or how we want to name it, that they have the knowledge which is necessary to deal with the topics which are relevant. And therefore, the recognition is necessary, and therefore the Customs Competency Framework is very helpful and is necessary as well. And in the academic field, we have a double system of quality assurance. The Customs Competency Framework does not take into account the academic aspects of a customs program. We have the situation, well, in Europe at least, that all university programs at all universities have to be accredited by the so-called Bologna regulations or Bologna process. And that means the system of bachelor, the system of master, credit points, and so on. And this is the guarantee that all courses which name themselves bachelor, which have the degree at the end master, they have at least, let's say, an academic quality standard. Let's from bachelor 3 years, 4 years, or master 1 year, 2 year, and so on, and so many credit points and so on. So this is a quantity aspect. It's also a quality aspect, and both now the Customs Competency Framework and the accreditation by the national accreditation boards. This is a very, very valuable thing, because the accreditors, the assessment of the in the accreditation process, they don't say too much regarding the content of a program. It's more the formal aspects, methodological aspects, exam aspects, and so on. and quality of lecturers, what is necessary, what quality of lecturers is necessary. These are the aspects of the accreditation process, but they don't speak about what is the necessary content of such a program, which is named customs or international trade. They don't have the knowledge.
No.
It's very difficult to find an assessor, at least in Germany, who has the knowledge to know what has to be in such a program, because all the people who would know are lecturers in our program, and so they can't assess the program anymore. That's a problem.
It is a real issue, and it does raise the question of the academic versus the professional, because, for example, in accountancy, the practice is that, yes, there are academic programs and you can take a bachelor's degree in accountancy or business or whatever. But then if you want to be a credible practitioner, you must also get a professional qualification, generally, well, in this part of the world at least, through a state-recognized agency, which is staffed by professionals.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the additional aspect I would like to mention as well. Let's now look at the professional level, operational level, and education or training for the professional level. There is a lack of standardization in all Europe. That's the Customs Competency Framework can deal with those courses as well, regarding the content and everything. But regarding the national particularities, the European Commission cannot give any advice or regulations. And that's a problem which we don't have in the academic area or at the academic level, but which has to be solved. I think
needs to be addressed. And is there a way, do you think, Professor, where the European Commission or some other Europe-wide authority could recognize professional courses which are offered outside the academic field? That is, where you have, because the many of the courses in customs which are most directly useful, as it were, particularly, let's say, at the operational or professional level, they need to be offered by people who are actually practicing in the field and whose knowledge is current and who have some hands-on experience. And there is, unfortunately, still very little overlap between that group of experts and the lecturers in universities, who become lecturers through a completely different route and career path. So,
I think there is an option. I think there is an option because, as you know, one of the preconditions to become an AO, an authorized economic operator, is that you can show that you have knowledge, that you have theoretical knowledge or practical knowledge for several years. But the aspect of theoretical knowledge could maybe in guidance documents of the European Commission relate to the Customs Competency Framework for the professional courses, which is existing. And insofar, this would be a way to bring these Customs Competency Framework for the professional level into the knowledge or into the awareness, so to speak, not the knowledge, but into the awareness of the business and the customs as well. And so the customs administration, when there is an application for an IEO, could ask, so what is the exact education of the people you have in your business who are dealing with customs aspects, and what have they learned so far, and how have they got their knowledge? And they could then, I think, set standards.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they could set standards and say we expect or accept only a course with several hundreds of hours of training or with this and that content and so on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could maybe can elaborate on that. Well, what you can do is, if you, let's say, if you would share and recognize that 30% of the knowledge of the operational field is similar in trade and business. At the same moment, you recognize that within the 27 member states, where customs all are educated different in their own schools, in their own training centers, that also they have 30% of their knowledge, at least 30%, if not even more, within customs is similar. So what you could do is set up a training curriculum which covers the 30% of knowledge that everyone needs to have in the customs and the business sector. And that curriculum can be offered everywhere in all countries. And then everyone can build on top of that his other 70%, depending on the sector where you actually work or the country where you actually work. So if you would have a basic curriculum, and that could also actually be assisted by or even recognized by this recognition, put in this recognition program from the European Commission. They have done now a very good. They've taken a very good step, and the recognition program as such was set up a couple of years ago. The Commission is now working on the reassessment of the current recognitions. There will be a follow-up of that, but the European Commission has launched at least a legal proposal for a big change of customs legislation. And one of the parts in that proposal is setting up an agency, including the task to have more arrangements on education and training on a European level, so that recognition program actually could be extended not only to these levels that we have now, but to create a common curriculum for business and public sector all over across the EU. And then again, maybe only covering 30% of everything that an operational expert needs to know, but then you have this common ground.
Yes, absolutely. I see. It's an interesting approach. My understanding of the Commission certification procedure is that there are national contact points appointed in each member state, but that while, as you mentioned, Frank, they are currently recertifying, as it were, university courses that were previously recognized. The actual launch of a new recognition or revitalized recognition program hasn't yet been announced, but we would expect that to come very soon. I suppose the feeling I get from you both, and thank you both for very, very interesting insights, but just to put back to you, as it were, what I'm hearing from it is that the recognition is there, the acceptance is there across Europe that more education is needed, more focused education, and as you point out, Frank, it's a different type of education in that it is multidisciplinary, and that it's not just law, it's not just operations, it's not just this, it's a mixture. And there is a really strong need for greater awareness on the part of, say, business strategists, whether that be entrepreneurs or business managers or their advisors or whatever, a great need for awareness of customs and its pervasive qualities. However, what I'm hearing from you both is that the progress is slow. And when we talk about as you say, the new agency proposed by the European Commission, Frank, with a remit in education, so we may have an educational program across the EU by 2040, do you think? My perception is that the need is a lot more urgent. And have you any positive words to say about the possibility of some order emerging out of the present really accelerated demand for customs? Because I think the big the big structure, the formal structure on a European level is going to take many years. The need is urgent now. So do we just make do as we are?
I'm a bit more optimistic towards that proposal. 2037 is as scheduled as the end of the total proposal with all its content. So, and we should not forget that what Professor Wolffgang already said, this recognition, that the recognition program is running. So, and they're reassessing, and they will open for other universities. But what is needed for real education is that the demand actually is shouted out towards the educational institutes. An educational institute, on whatever level, they want to feed the demand of their consumers. This is the business and the public sector. And when the demand is not communicated well enough, then they will not start offering it. The majority of what we are doing now, and actually what we've been discussing in the past hour, are all kind of like executive programs. This means that people have finished their regular studies, secondary school, bachelor's or master's in whatever direction, and then they start working in this field. And that's the moment that they then are being sent to additional studies, additional programs. This is all executive education. If you look at other fields, you mentioned tax. In tax, you do not have to be working in any tax field, but you can study tax on a little lower level. In secondary school, you can study tax in all kind of indirect or direct taxes on the bachelor's level, on the academic, on the master's level. In all kind of universities, these studies are being offered to young students in the public study programs. And they then start applying for a job afterwards in the business or the public sector, and I'll start working in that field, and they only need to have a little bit of corporate education to work in their own businesses. And this is what we don't have, simply because the schools do not provide for experts in our field. That's why then afterwards we all have to send them. And then you get into a difficult topic, because having people employed and then sending the executive education, it's very often expensive, because it's not within the funded mechanisms of the university programs. And it costs a lot of time, because you lose that person 1 or 2 or 3 days a week, or several weeks a year, because he's going to school. And I'm convinced that as well the public as the private sector, they would like to employ people that come immediately from school and already carry a lot of that knowledge. So we have to start putting the collective demand on this business knowledge of our sector to the regular educational institutes, so they start, let's say, appealing to that demand and offering the proper programs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. Professor, would you like to sum up?
Yes, I'm a little bit optimistic. I would say that at least the academic education will grow. And I can see in Germany that some other universities or universities of applied science, they not run a whole program, whole master's program, whole bachelor's program regarding customs, but they are trying to have modules in their bachelor program for business, for legal studies, and so on, so that at least in several universities in Germany, students have the chance to choose a module for this topic, which is then a percentage of the whole study program, of the whole bachelor program or the whole master program. So this is good already, and I can see that in other countries of the European Union as well. You're mentioning the reassessment, which is going on next week, and there are several to reassess several programs with modules only. It's not the complete program, but with modules as well. which is helpful insofar.
It's an easier entry route for universities, isn't
yes,
it?
of course, yes. So this is, from this point of view, I'm optimistic. I think there will be some universities offering a full program, others will offer part programs or part-time programs or what else, or module programs, which has not been before, years before. So this is a positive development from my point of view. And for example, in Germany, the Customs Academy or the Customs University from the Ministry of Finance, from the German Customs, they are just changing their programs to a bachelor. So next year there is a customs bachelor, but only for customs officers in Germany. Starting, maybe they will have a master's program later on as well. I don't know. So this is a process which is going on, and so far I'm optimistic.
Extending. Absolutely, yes. I mean, it is encouraging, and of course, I think one of the messages that we would like to send out from this podcast is that those looking for training should look first at what is being offered by universities and academic institutions before responding to the never-ending email offers of training by people who perhaps may not be very well trained themselves. Okay, so the quality of training, I think, is something that we would emphasize. It's really interesting. This has been, for me, and I'm sure for our listeners, a remarkable overview in a short period of time of the whole area of customs education. It has extended, the discussion has extended very widely, and overall is coming to, I think, between us all, an acceptance that the marketplace in terms of education, that is, the universities and educational institutions, are indeed doing their best to respond to the demand which is out there and which is at an unprecedented level. So we can hope going forward to see more and more programs, as you point out, Professor, either including modules on customs or indeed in, as Frank has indicated as well, courses that cross over training between customs officials who are in training and perhaps with an input also of business operatives who require the training. I think the more crossover we could see in that area, the better. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, if I may, with many thanks to Frank Heijmann, the Customs Counsellor of the Permanent Representation of the Netherlands to the European Commission, which is an impressively long title, Frank. And we are indeed very, very grateful for your time. I realize how difficult it is for an official of your seniority to participate in a podcast like this, and we really appreciate you making the effort. And of course, Professor Hans-Michael Wolffgang of the University of Münster, who is, we are always honored, Michael, every time you join us, because the fact that an authority of your stature supports our efforts in CKI, it means a great deal to us, so we really do appreciate your support.
Welcome.
So with that, I will say goodbye. My name, since I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, is Anthony Buckley, and I am the chair of CKI. Thank you all for your attention.